Hi everyone, and welcome to Papaarade. My name is Robert. Today I'm going to be talking about why we chose surrogacy instead of adoption. And I must say, this is probably the question that we get asked the most, especially on social media. And I get it. Surrogacy is a controversial topic. Being a family constellation of two gay dads is also quite a new phenomenon. You don't see so many gay dads out there in the world. It is becoming more common. Of course, it might be more common to see a lesbian couple having children, but for having two male parents, still very new, especially in Germany. So I thought I would do a video on this topic because it's probably our biggest criticism, so to speak, especially I think every time we post a TikTok video, people are always saying, well, why don't you just adopt? And I get that. It's a very, very fair question, one that I absolutely considered myself. I mean, at the beginning of this journey, I was actually a bit turned off to surrogacy, which I'll get to in a minute. Adoption is not as easy as people would think, let alone for heterosexual couples. I mean, forget two men, and I will go into the specifics of that and why. So it's a very valid question, and that's why I want to address it, because I want to shed light on this topic. I also want to provide some reasoning so that you all, as you get to know us a little bit better, you can understand how we got to where we are now, why we chose surrogacy. But the main point is like, even though we are choosing surrogacy as our journey, we heavily considered adoption. We did so much research. We did go down that outlet, absolutely. It is not the path that we chose, and I hope that you all will also respect that we chose surrogacy. But I want to definitely shed light on the topic because I think for anyone, adoption is not an easy thing, unfortunately. As we know, every kid deserves a loving home, a loving family, whatever that family constellation is. But actually, there are very many reasons why it's not so easy, and some might actually shock you. So let's get started. So let's do a quick reality check about adoption in Germany. Did you know that in 2023, there were only 3,601 adoptions? This number is actually the lowest since German reunification. And out of those adoptions, only 837 were non-relative adoptions. So mostly adoptions that occur are through family of their own. So maybe if a family member dies, another family member will adopt the children. If someone remarries, maybe the step-parent is adopting the children. Maybe if there's an adoption, then like the siblings of that child are being adopted. So only 837 adoptions in 2023 in Germany were just pure adoptions of children that had no family connection. Also, I would say availability is actually one of the biggest problems. People out there just say, oh, there are all these kids waiting. People probably think that there are all these orphanage homes, like in Oliver Twist or something. I mean, those do exist around the world, of course, especially in more poor countries. But in Germany, there's actually not a huge pool of children to choose from. For example, did you know that for every 4 families looking to adopt, there's only 1 child available? So yes, the children are out there, but to say, oh, all these children waiting, there's not actually as many as one might think. So when you have the idea of limited availability, extreme competition amongst people waiting, and then not only combined with the fact that that wait can take several years due to many factors, that might be a pretty big hindrance why people don't adopt. And there are certainly a lot of adoption requirements and challenges. For adoption, there are extremely high standards. The agencies are going to look at the home life, stability, finances, age, health, so many different factors. And unfortunately, as people are just people, there may be some extenuating circumstances where maybe the couple is a bit older, maybe someone is not in perfect health, maybe their finances are not what they want them to be, maybe they have a very small apartment and the agency doesn't think that it's big enough, whatever it might be, to basically fulfill all of those requirements is almost impossible. So in Germany, they basically want you to be like this perfect couple, extremely hard to obtain. And not only that, you really do need to be of a certain age. The agencies have a really hard time setting up families for adoption when they're gonna be over 35. So I think especially for straight couples, this is already a huge challenge, because I think for women that are looking to have a kid and maybe can't, they've probably first tried the natural way. Then they've tried IVF. Then wait times in between those, maybe they've done multiple cycles, multiple attempts, maybe they were pregnant and had a miscarriage. So all of that takes many years. And then by the time they finally decide to say, okay, now we go down the route of adoption, the chances of them being under 35, I mean, of course, depends how early they started their journey, but I would say in a more modern world in which we live in, people are waiting a little bit longer to have kids, especially women want to join the workforce, perhaps first before they have kids. That age is going to be higher and higher. So for people to start their adoption journey before 35, it's, yeah, a bit difficult. So then what comes on top is the scrutiny for LGBTQ plus parents. It's subtle. I mean, I wouldn't say adoption agencies are out there saying, no, we don't do this, like absolutely not, but there's definitely going to be bias. And unfortunately, I must say, especially talking to a lot of people that we follow, a lot of people who have done the adoption process, a lot of it just depends on the caseworker that's assigned to you, that's assigned to your case that you're working with. If they have a problem with someone being gay, or they don't think, oh, it's good that a child only has, two male parents, that's going to be a huge hindrance. Whereas if you have a caseworker that's totally open, doesn't matter, that's, something like that might be the reason why you can adopt or not. And sometimes it just is luck, who knows? But unfortunately, we have met people that have just said, the person that was assigned to our case just came out point blank and said, it's not going to be possible. 2 men, forget it. You need to look elsewhere. While there may be some subtle bias where people outright don't say those kind of things, there are instances out there where people are point blank saying, no, sorry. And I think most of all, a lot of these agencies, they probably prioritize heterosexual couples. So if a gay couple is coming in there, they may even be a lot further down on the wait list. People may not take them so seriously. And then I think, especially, like I said, there's like this contradiction a little bit of saying, well, you need to have all your finances in order. You need to have a good, stable household. You need to be healthy, but you also need to be super young. So for like a gay couple to come in, maybe in their late 20s, while they might fulfill those criteria, the caseworkers may still not take them very seriously because of also other biases. I don't know. Whereas I feel like most gay couples looking to adopt or looking to start a family are probably going to be on the older side. It's just the nature of how it is. I mean, I myself am 34. Our surrogacy agency already told us that I'm one of the youngest people that they've dealt with at the agency as a gay couple. So there's that, but most people are a bit older. People deciding to have kids in this family constellation, they're probably not going to be in their mid to early 20s. And if they are, they're probably not going to be taken so seriously. So an interesting statistic about adoption, only 3% of adoptions in Germany involve same-sex couples. 3%. I mean, that's nothing. So every time out there, some troll on the internet is saying, well, why don't you adopt? Well, if we could, if it would be a bit easier, then maybe we would. Another challenge, which has gotten easier, but until 2017, gay couples could not adopt jointly. So before then, only one parent was able to adopt, and then later, the second person could then be added on. In 2017, when marriage equality became legal in Germany, then this process became a lot easier. People then could retroactively both become the parents of the adopted child. But before then, that was also a big hindrance. Perhaps someone said, we don't want to adopt if only one of us is allowed to be considered the legal parent. That gives a lot of uncertainty for couples, which I can totally understand. People want their family to be recognized. And before 2017, that was another big hurdle that perhaps turned a lot of people off to adoption. So now let's talk about some misconceptions about adoption. Let's address the belief when people say, there are so many kids waiting to be adopted, why not adopt? Fair. But the reality is that most children adopted are stepchildren. They're not newborns, not infants. The pool of those needing to be adopted are usually older children, siblings, children with disabilities. Many hopeful parents are not emotionally or physically prepared for these types of situations. Adoption is beautiful, but it requires specific readiness and abilities that not every family has. So again, out of the adoptions that are happening in Germany, adopting a healthy newborn is super rare. It's like having sunshine in the winter in Germany. I mean, it's possible, but pretty unlikely. So to go back to my story a little bit, when Martin and I decided that we wanted to become parents, I immediately jumped to the idea of like, well, let's adopt. I think for me, the biggest hurdle for surrogacy was the cost, to be completely honest. It is a huge burden for male couples that if they want to become parents, they cannot have kids themselves, or as women can, they can more easily find a sperm donor, for example. But as we all know, male couples have even more biological challenges to make that happen. So with something like surrogacy, there's just a lot more costs involved. And for me, I kind of thought at the beginning, like, that's a bit unfair. The burden is on us. There's just so much that goes into it. Do we really want to take this on? So of course, for me, the first idea was to adopt. Why not? But then, like I said, once I really looked into it, did the research, talked to people, it just became actually so impossible, it seemed. And of course, we could have tried. But again, the uncertainty of knowing who's the caseworker going to be, what is the availability like, do we fulfill all the criteria? There were a lot of uncertainties. Then another important point that I want to address, whether it be for heterosexual or homosexual couples, there is an important factor for a lot of human beings in this world. I think it's just written into our nature as humans or biology, but a lot of people out there want a biological child. The biggest criticism that comes out of this is people say that that is selfish. And I mean, I can see why people might think that, because especially if there's this idea of like, oh, there's a huge pool of children waiting to be adopted, you don't go down that path, but then you instead choose to have a biological child, that there's like this disconnect, that choice somehow makes you selfish. But it is what it is. For people, a biological connection to the child is important. Now, here's the thing. I grew up knowing a lot of children that were adopted. Also, there are plenty of TV shows out there with people looking for their birth parents that were adopted. I must say, for adopted children, being adopted is not an easy thing for children to grasp. A lot of people, when they find this out, like maybe if they weren't told from the very beginning, but their parents told them a bit later, to suddenly know that the people that you thought were your parents are suddenly not your biological parents, this can cause a huge conflict within a child's mind. Or maybe not from the child, but when they get older, this longing to know who are my biological parents, or wow, someone gave me up. How could someone do that to me? And of course, especially if someone had a wonderful childhood, wonderful adopted parents, that is all great. But maybe it's not necessarily the case. Maybe through the adoption, the children were still abused. Whatever the case is, I just want to emphasize that children that are adopted don't have it easy. And there are also criticism of surrogacy that also say, oh, when the children find that out, they could also have problems with that. Or of course, they also might want to know who their birth parents are, or there might be some kind of inner conflict to know that, oh, I was born through this process and not naturally. But I think, again, when people are always saying, well, why don't you adopt? They don't realize that adoption is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but it doesn't always turn into a happy story for everyone. I have seen so many cases, whether in television or literally one of my best friends was adopted, and she had severe mental issues because of it. And that led to things like, for example, addiction. These things can happen to anyone, and I'm not saying at all it's due to being adopted. And of course, there are so many people out there that are adopted, have a wonderful life, beautiful families, and have no issue with it, have no desire to learn their birth parents. But there's also the other side, and I want you all to realize, if you just want to throw adoption on everyone, it's not the perfect solution for everyone. It's not going to also be the perfect solution for the kids. There may be problems later in life because of it. But on the other hand, through surrogacy, at least there is this biological connection. So even though you're growing up kind of in a different family constellation, one of the parents is at least going to be the biological parent to that child, which hopefully gives a bit more of a stronger family tie. That's at least the way that we see it. And for us, the biological connection was super important. So this is a factor maybe not everyone can understand, but that's why people might choose surrogacy over adoption, is because they want this biological connection. And I would just say to the viewers out there, please don't judge that. You don't know what people are going through. I think especially for heterosexual couples, women, it's probably a part of their genes, like their biological nature, to say that they want a biological child, because that's just the natural process of how it happens. So please don't judge that, because for a lot of people it is super important, and that's why they choose surrogacy over adoption. This was also a big factor for us, and probably for a lot of people out there, because there are indeed long wait times, is that the timeline, it's hard to know how long it's going to take. Of course, adoption actually can happen very fast. We do know a couple that basically got a call and said, we have availability right away. Can you pick up the child in 1 week? And they were basically scrambling to get everything in their life in their house ready. So it can happen super fast, but I would say that is super rare. You're gonna have long wait times. It's gonna be years, maybe multiple attempts. Or if you're even adopting from another country, then there are so many other hurdles that you have to go through. But this uncertainty of the timeline is also a big turnoff for a lot of people, because family planning is an important thing. People say, I want to have a child within a year, 2 years, whatever it might be. With adoption, it could happen a year, 2 years, but it could also take 5 years. And I think especially if people are aging, if people want to say, well, I don't want to be elderly when I'm raising my child, that's a very fair point. If people are adopting already in their late 40s, to say, if it takes 5 years, do we really want to be parents when we're 50? That uncertainty of the timeline is also a turnoff for a lot of people. And with surrogacy, of course, as we know from our own experience, there are a lot of uncertainties and delays in the process, but at least you can say, okay, once we find a surrogate, then this is what's going to be the timeline. I think especially for people that don't need to wait a long time for a surrogate, once they have one, they kind of know what to expect. Of course, there could be multiple implantations needed. There could all be miscarriages, whatever. But surrogacy provides a clearer and more stable timeline for couples than adoption does. This idea of having a predictable, proactive process was a lot more emotionally stable for us. It gave us a little bit more security, although we did have some setbacks during the surrogacy process. With adoption, it's just let up a lot more to fate. Like I said, the caseworker that you had, there's a lot more competition. There's just not the pool out there of young newborn children, and that just didn't give us the stability that we wanted. And because there is that lack of availability, especially in Germany, couples that do want to adopt are often forced to go abroad. Even in the US growing up, there were plenty of people that I knew that were adopted or had adopted that adopted from other countries, whether it was China, Russia, Africa, wherever. But then adopting from another country has so many other hurdles involved. There's even more bureaucracy, more paperwork, wait times, check-ins. And then again, if you're LGBTQ plus and adopting from a country where that might be illegal or frowned upon or whatever, that's going to make the process even more difficult. So it's not impossible. There's workarounds, for example, that just one parent adopts. That way it doesn't look like it's a gay couple, for example. But a lot of that is also very uncertain or, emotionally difficult. For me as a gay person to say, okay, I need to go to another country, how is that going to be received? Also, what kind of caseworker am I going to have? Are there going to be problems even though we get super far, then they suddenly say no? There could be specific legal challenges, hurdles with bringing the kid back, with having it be recognized in Germany. When you are dealing with another country, that just brings so many other hurdles into the picture. And that's not something that everyone is willing to take on, honestly. So why did we choose surrogacy, and why abroad and not in Germany? Well, as you may or may not know, surrogacy is not legal in Germany, so we needed to go abroad in order to make it happen. With myself being American, and also with the US being the most surrogacy-friendly country in the world, for us it just totally makes sense. And especially California, really being the state that is the leader in surrogacy, that has the laws that make it the easiest, especially for us to come back to Germany. Both of our names will be on the birth certificate. It will be easier for us to have the child recognized in Germany. We will have German passports. That whole process just gave us the security that we needed. Also, we had a little bit more control over the timeline, although there were setbacks, although it was not so easy to find a surrogate. It also at least gave us a little bit more to be able to plan and go upon when we started the process of creating our embryos, we could already start mentally preparing ourselves a little bit more. We could get our finances a bit more in order. We can get our house set up. We can clarify everything with childcare, with taking off time from work, whatever it was. It kind of gave us a bit more structure. And especially in the US, it's safe, it's regulated, all parties are respected. The surrogates have so many rights. There's a contract involved. They're really taken care of. They do medical and psychological evaluations. They were all, mothers themselves before. Many surrogates have been surrogates multiple times. They know what they're doing. They love being pregnant. They love being mothers. They love helping families. Our surrogate, one reason why we were so attracted to her is because she said she felt a calling in life to help people that couldn't become parents themselves the natural way, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. She felt like it was a calling. And so many people are so turned off to surrogacy because they say oh, the surrogates are being exploited. And I mean, yes, in certain countries that can absolutely be true. And I'm not saying that's not the case for everyone, but we felt that in the US, no one was being forced to be a surrogate. They were doing it through their own free will. There's a contract involved. Everything is regulated. In other countries, especially where it might be cheaper, you don't know their family situation. You don't know their intentions. You don't know if they're taking care of themselves and their health during the process. Doing surrogacy in the US basically checked all of the boxes for us to say, how can we do it as ethically as possible? How can we do it to ensure that everyone is protected in the right way? And also in the end, how can we have the most healthy baby possible? And California specifically gave us that security that we needed. So of course, need to address the ethical concerns with surrogacy. That's also a big criticism when people say, oh, well, why did you surrogacy and not adoption? Because surrogacy should be illegal, or it's violating the rights of women. I want to emphasize that surrogacy can be ethical and responsible. The surrogates in the US receive fair compensation. They are protected medically, psychologically. There's consent involved. There is a meaningful connection and relationship established between the intended parents and the surrogate. There are other countries out there where the surrogate can't even see a picture of the intended parents, or when they're on a call, the cameras are turned off. And that for us is not personable at all. For us, it's super important that we have a good relationship with our surrogate, that we can communicate with her, that we can get updates, that we can, support her in every way possible during this process and really be there and be present. And we also recognize the sacrifice that she's making. She's taking almost a year out of her life to have someone else's baby inside of her and care for that. And also when she has her own family, I mean, of course she's being compensated, but it's no easy task. And everyone knows pregnancy is hard. There can always be things that go wrong. There can always be complications, but especially with surrogacy in the US, those risks are heavily minimized. There is extensive genetic testing that happens. There is a whole medical due diligence process that goes into it. So yes, there's always a chance and always the risk, but that risk is so minimized. They will never put the sperm and egg together of two different people if there's going to be the chance for a genetic disease, for example. If someone tests positive, for example, being a carrier of sickle cell anemia, and the other person as well, they will not create embryos with those two things. One person has to be negative. So this idea of we also had this concern, could our child have a disability? Could there be complications during the pregnancy? Of course it can happen, but it's super, super rare because of all the genetic testing that they do. The products of surrogacy often lead to the most healthy babies that are out there. So this idea of, yes, every pregnancy comes with risks. There can be always things that go wrong. But again, the idea of minimizing this, all these medical checks that go into it, consent, these things are quite rare. So to say that we're exploiting women because every pregnancy takes a toll on our body. I mean, yes, of course, but the chances of something really going wrong are very slim. So any other pregnancy that happens, the chances are a lot higher. So why with choosing to go through surrogacy is that suddenly exploitation when those risks are so minimized, at least in the US. I know in other countries, we don't know if that's always going to be the process, what the risks are. But again, that's our decision for why we did it in the US. I think people also just need to realize that, every family, they're trying to do the best they can. They're trying to make the choices that make sense for them, for their family, their circumstances. I think already with surrogacy, why it's not possible for a lot of people is just because of the high costs involved. So people do turn to adoption because it might be cheaper. So maybe there would be a higher demand for surrogacy, but the cost is honestly a big hindrance for a lot of people. But I would say don't judge a family for whatever route they go through. Every route has their own unique challenges. Adoption is a beautiful thing, but if it doesn't make sense to that family, if they perhaps don't qualify, I think also you really have to realize is so many people that go down the route of surrogacy have tried to adopt already. So to so quickly judge someone for doing surrogacy and saying, well, why don't you adopt? We have literally met people that have tried. They said, we would have loved to adopt. It made so much sense for us, but they were denied. They didn't qualify. They had a caseworker that judged them for being gay. We know a story of, basically the caseworker laughed in their face and said, it's not going to be possible for you. You don't know the story of everyone going into a child journey. So just because someone is choosing surrogacy does not mean that they didn't consider adoption or didn't try. So to just come straight out with a judgment or to hide behind some comment on TikTok, I just feel is super unfair because you don't know what people are going through. I think with any journey of being pregnant, I would say most women that I know all had miscarriages. I would say over half of the people that I know having children in their 30s are using some type of IVF procedure or treatment. But it's not something that people so openly talk about, and why should they? What would you want to tell all your coworkers all the deep personal setbacks that you had with getting pregnant or having to go through IVF? There is still much stigma surrounding this topic. It's not something that we're talking about enough. In Germany, a lot of these things are not possible. So, people need to go through other routes, like us going to the US. That's not something that we want to talk to every stranger about. So I would just say to you all, please don't judge people so much. Have understanding of people wanting to have kids, whatever route it might be. And we also understand that there's criticism with us being gay parents. There's always going to be people saying a child needs a mother, or we're going to go out there in the world and people will ask, well, where is the mother? You have to understand there are so many different types of families. There are people raising children that are not their parents. So you have grandparents, you have aunts and uncles, step parents, you have kind of patchwork families. So maybe you have friends that are somehow raising a child. Maybe, someone accidentally got pregnant. The people don't want to get together, in a marriage or relationship. So they kind of raise the parent together, co-parenting. There are, of course, so many single parents. My parents, unfortunately, were divorced when I was 5 years old, and I was mostly raised by my mother. My dad was kind of in and out of the picture. He wanted to be more in the picture, but there were reasons why he couldn't. And so I was mostly raised in a single parent household. And yes, I had a mother. She did an amazing job of raising me and sacrificed so much to provide for me. And I really had the best life possible and owe everything in my life to her. And I think also going through all the challenges that I did growing up in a single parent household made me who I am today and somehow made me stronger in the end. But also there are single dads out there. Maybe a parent dies, maybe a parent leaves, maybe a parent is in jail. Unfortunately, the reality is in the US especially, a huge percentage of children are raised without a mom or a dad. I would say if, a straight dad out there that had a mother die, most people aren't gonna rush to judgment and say oh, well, where's the mother? Or a child needs a mother. They're a lot more understanding. Now we have all different types of family constellations, LGBTQ+, so these patchwork families that maybe there's shared parenting that goes on. Even with straight couples, maybe people getting married, remarried. I knew plenty of people growing up, they lived 1 week with one set of parents, 1 week with the other, maybe a couple days, they were switching. A lot of people really had problems with that. Divorce also leads to all kinds of challenges. So just because a child grows up in a heterosexual environment is also not always going to be ideal for the child or have their best interests at mind. So again, this judgment of saying, oh, well, two men, the child won't have a mother. we will have so much female influence in our lives. There's family members, there's friends, there's teachers, grandmothers, neighbors, whatever it is. There is going to be some female presence. And yes, I get it. Like, a child is born biologically from a woman, but what is important, and the statistics will back me up on this, it's important that a child is brought up with love, that the parents show the child that they're proud of them, that they're there for them, that they're providing for them, that they're sacrificing for them. If a child grows up wanted and loved, that is enough. That is what human beings seek in this world, that kind of stability. Gender should not be so important these days. But yes, we will take all the precautions that we need to make sure that if our child especially is seeking a bit more female influence, then we will try to provide it with that. We also know that maybe not everything will be perfect with our family constellation, with our story, but we are going into this journey being super aware of it, having done our research, looking for the signs and whatnot. I think just being conscious of it and having awareness of it is already a big step, whereas there are so many children born into this world where their parents could care less about them, where they're not conscious about these things, where they're not wanted. So I think having a child that will be wanted so much, we will hopefully be able to provide for our children the best way possible. And so I get it. It's not going to have a fully present mother, but we do want to stay in contact with our surrogate. Our child will be able to know who its biological mother is, for example. So if later in life the child wants to, get to know these people more, they have the option, and we will totally respect that. But just understand that, yes, I know that gay parents are not super common, especially in Germany, but we don't talk enough about all the other family constellations out there. And there's not so much judgment and stigma tied to those, so why should we also attach it to other family constellations? So that would be a challenge from me to you, is to realize every family is different, but every family should be respected and lifted up, acknowledged, and we should all support each other. Like I said, the most important thing is love and respect for a child. So again, surrogacy was the right choice for us and for our family. The timeline, the security that we needed. We did consider adoption, but this is our choice and this is what made sense for us and our family. But realize that that is not always going to be the case for everyone. A lot of people want to adopt. Adoption is a beautiful thing, but it is super difficult. It's super challenging. In Germany, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of criteria involved. There's not a huge pool of children out there. Not everyone is willing to adopt older kids, disabled kids, whatever it might be. So again, please don't judge people that don't adopt and choose a different route or a different path. Also, just want to quickly acknowledge foster parenting. Also a super, super beautiful thing, comes with its own unique sets of challenges. It's also out there, but again, that could lead to temporary situations. There are often children in the foster system that have been through a lot of things, maybe been abused, maybe been neglected, that have problems later in life, that need extra support and assistance. And the people that are willing and able to do this are providing a huge service out there, and it is such a beautiful thing. And I maybe had the courage, to be a foster parent, but it's also not for everyone. So again, just to judge people because they don't go through a certain path or the path that you think is right for them, I think is super unfair. So just a few closing thoughts. First of all, thank you so much for listening to my journey. It's a very unique journey. We're trying to really put ourselves out there and just be a resource for you all, share our stories. So first of all, thank you for listening to my story. But I just want to conclude saying adoption is such a beautiful thing. Surrogacy can also be such a beautiful thing. So thank you to everyone who has adopted, who's willing to adopt, but also realize it's not a reality for everyone. Please don't judge that. Please respect that decision as well. I would invite you all to share your stories, share your thoughts and perspectives. Maybe you've tried to adopt before and it didn't happen. Maybe you have adopted. I want to hear about your beautiful story and how it worked out for you. We certainly follow a lot of gay dads out there who did adopt and had a great experience. We also have the opposite that to being true. But I think if we can talk about this more, especially in a country like Germany where it is difficult for gay parents to adopt, that the laws are not fully there supporting us, let's talk about it. Let's have this discussion going. Let's push for our governments to respect all different types of family forms. Let's make some change and make some process. So that's my call to you all. Let's talk about these stories more openly. Let's share and value every type of family constellation out there, realizing that there are so many different types of parents and family constellations out there, and we should really respect and support all of them. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope I could provide some interesting insight on adoption and surrogacy. Also share our story of why we chose surrogacy and not adoption. So again, going forward, as we continue to share more about our stories, this is the reason why we chose to do surrogacy and not adoption. Please respect that. There will still be hate comments out there. Probably every TikTok video we put out there, YouTube short, whatever it might be, people are gonna say, oh, a child needs a mother, or why not adoption, why this and that. You know, that will always exist out there. People want to provoke. People, you know, maybe they don't want actually an answer of why we chose surrogacy, not adoption. They just want to push buttons, poke the bear, provoke, you know, whatever it might be. But honestly, it comes with the territory. It is what it is. But I hope that through this video, sharing our experience in a little hard, that you will really be able to understand why we chose what we did, and that going forward, you will appreciate and respect our story as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video and comment and subscribe. See you next time.